Okay.
How about now? Excuse me? How about that? Okay. Well, OCO down es easier. Porque a la décanaste. Pushda o que te conecte. Ne esté de quoi? Porque de. Ne esté tipo cante. Mustiaca. Ole qua este o pasti nostro de Cristina. Uneste. Ecco qua la testa in este university. Imagina aeta che qua. Hello, good afternoon. How are you? I'm glad to be here. And I wish that I was not going to be here to talk about something so prolific that has literally hit the soul and the spirit of the hearts of the people. And now that I'm in the color of the Holocaust. So I am pleased that Sonoma State University has taken the courageous boldness that they have taken to offer a series to talk about this. And I'm humbled that they might think that I might have something to say to add to the conversation. So I'll do my best to contribute. And I will say that I will ask that you, if something I say or that you take away from this afternoon's discussion, is that I'm not trying to speak for all Native people, indigenous people, often referred to now in the Western culture as American Indian, Native American, or Indian, and by our many nations of people. So, although I hope that I can represent them in the sense of speaking about very clearly what we as a people for over 500 years have endured. It's not over. It is ongoing. It's called genocide. And this whole process that began for our people at the very entrance of non-indigenous people setting foot on this land, with good intentions in their mind's eye for who and why they were coming, but without consideration of individuals that were very present, a culture that was in place, and that would still be in place today when that invasion might occur. What I want to also say is that this discussion, this topic that we now call Holocaust, and often referred to the Holocaust, historically referred to the Holocaust referring to only one group, that it only occurred in one group. And it occurred to one group that was tied to my brothers and sisters that I affectionately refer to as my Jewish brothers and sisters. And not to take away from or negate from their experience, that horrific experience that they had. But as you've seen in the series, that there is that's one group that it occurred to, and that because of what happened to them and what happened to my people, which brings us together forever, continues to go on in the world around us. In this very moment that we're speaking, and before, or that we're here, and before we leave today, there will be millions of people killed across the world. For there is a plan somewhere in someone, even as we're speaking, of individuals talking about how they can eliminate other people. I know that this government here wish to leave and still looking at a way to make that happen. Now that means a whole total invisibility, which is called genocide, which is a trickle down on what's called Holocaust. So what I would like to add to the conversation and for your conscious awareness is that in the 1800s, what began to happen to my people, I generally identify my grandmothers wanted you to know where I come from, and I wanted you to know where my mothers are, and my grandmother's mothers, because I'm here today because of them. I stand on their shoulders because of what they endure, and maybe what you heard, and that is all the 12 years of my history directly from my people. And there are many trails of tears in our history, Western history, where they like to talk about indigenous people, which one from certain groups with just a paragraph of certain part of history, and that's what we're going to let you know about us. So that little rabbit, I chased rabbits a lot, so that was my first rabbit. And my dad, when I could get something, when my grandmother, she always felt it, but she was just trying this, trying this, trying this. So when I was talking, then I say something else. So I would really know those rabbits together. Destinations together. So back to the 1800s, what began to happen to our people, indigenous people, what we're not calling them right there. What began to happen to our people in 1800, and the reason I want you to know that is in regards to, again, this Holocaust treatment of putting us on reservations and starting with subjugation. That's what I would to let you know what happened. That's what it's subjugation, determination, reservations, and then trying to organize us through unification, then assimilation, and then of course this idea of just knowledge and personality. At that time, when all of that started, it affected in the 20th century, in the 1900s, when a man in Germany by the name of Hitler decided that he wanted to annihilate, as you know, people of the affectionate culture as Jewish brothers and sisters. And where he got this idea of this complete, let's get rid of a group of people that look a certain way, talk a certain way, walk a certain way, go a certain way, do a certain way. The way to get rid of him is he looked to the west. And what he looked at was for a man by the name of Andrew Jackson, which you might know. And Andrew Jackson is his hero. And he looked at what Andrew Jackson did, and he said, that's the way to get rid of these people. And that's what I'm going to do for these Jewish people. I'm going to eliminate them. And he wasn't successful. They really, really did take that, and it cost millions of dollars, just as it did with mine as well. There were 9 million as in 18 years. Very quickly, from the 1970s now to 1970. From that population, again, modeling out one generation to the next generation, really just trying to survive, stay in there, because by that time, a lot of people in the Indians, which gets to the point that's another, of course, movement of genocide, that's trying to diminish the level of the people who have said that you're not really Jewish, or you're not really Irish, or Italian, or any of those other groups that you're not really. So, for our people, and my people directly, being Natasha and relocated all the way from the first part of us to be getting that segregation. Even though we wanted to include that part, we didn't imagine it itself. That's segregating us to this position in the
separation and putting us on reservations. That's where reservations came from. And the reservations was, you never can just think that it just happened. No, it was planned. It was planned by the U.S. Congress and the senators and the government of the United States. And the idea was to move us out from the culture at large and to put us in isolated areas. And for my people, the whole reason of moving us across the United States, what was this item that's now identified as the Trail of Tears. And by the way, the Trail of Tears was not because we were crying, because we were leaving our land, although in our birthplace, which was in the mountains of what's now referred to as the Smoky Mountains, and it's now called Tennessee and North Carolina in that area. But it was the people along the way, as they would put out the little printing papers and the little things that the built towns along the way would hear that these Indians were being moved and they were going to, so they would go out to the edge of the town, they would go all the way out to kind of see, because this was kind of like big news. They wanted to see an Indian, they wanted to see what was happening. And those were the people that cried. They cried because of the conditions under which we were being forcefully relocated to what was called and created reservations. The idea was now that we were not supposed to survive that forced march. We were not supposed to survive once we got there. And we were being pushed across the Mississippi River because that was uninhabited or not. No one was going to survive up there for anybody. It's now called Oklahoma, in the area that we're at. A reservation that was created there is now called Holocaust, which is why we have two bands, Eastern Band and Western Band. The Eastern Band, which is my direct family, my direct ancestors, where we hid out in the caves, just like the Jews, many of them, that hid out in the very earth, and in the very belly of Mother Earth that held her and held these individuals in the homes of people that ripped up their, floors of their home and made spaces for them. Mother Earth was holding them just as Mother Earth held us, because where we went to hide out, not for a couple of days, not for a couple of weeks, years. We lived in caves in what's now called Smoky Mountains, and that was our survival, just like many Jewish individuals and other peoples, but Jewish people that other people hid in. They hid in their own caves as well. But the belly of Mother Earth held us both. And so that's those are my ancestors, and that's why we have that reservation in North Carolina, because after a couple of years, and actually, from what we know from the stories that were handed down, about after 20 months, someone ventured out to see kind of what it was like. And then after a couple more months, we began to kind of come out slowly from the caves. But that's why we have two different reservations, two different groups of people that are one nation, people divided still in two different locations. And one's in Tulsa, Oklahoma, what's now called Tulsa, was not supposed to survive because under the conditions in which we were forced to march, we were supposed to be moved in the middle of summer because the weather was better, but we were moved right when winter started. In November, they started moving us. The weather was horrific. We walked. The wagons that were there were the wagons that carried the food. And there was not enough food, there was not enough water, and there were no blankets. And when the reports of maybe some of your family members who were affectionately what we now today used to be allies, in other words, came to our defense, very much like the ones, of course, that came and hid the Jewish people, non-Jewish people helping Jewish people, non-Native people helping Native people. That's how we're all still here. That is the only reason we're all still here. And our own ability, our warrior selves inside of us to just endure and know that we had to survive. But someone said, these people are freezing, these people, Native people, talking about my people. They went back in and they started talking to some of the people that were writing these things up that went in with the newspapers that they were printing at that time. They were just like one sheet or two sheet. but printing up and saying, it's horrible because people are, they have no coats, no jackets, no blankets. So the U.S. government said, so the pressure was on the congressmen and the senators from these particular states that they were marching through, so they took out blankets and gave it to us. The only problem was that those blankets were infested with smallpox. Now, even in this thing of holding up and taking pictures and telling them, don't worry, we're going to take care of them, the plan was to eliminate us. The same ways that the films I'm sure you've seen, and the pictures you've seen, and I'm sure you've heard in this series, again, in Germany, and the Jewish individuals thinking that they're marching in to get a shower, walking right into their deathbed. The same genocide effect, the same Holocaust that was happening to our people, are thinking that we're getting a blanket to keep us warm. And it is the very blanket that will snuff our life out. And did kill our grandmas, killed our spiritual leaders, our elders, our babies, the ones that were the most vulnerable, going first. And a few survived. So now we're on these reservations. On reservations where we're not supposed to survive the reservation life, because again, remember, we're isolated. Oklahoma life was different than North Carolina life. The earth was different. And not just my people. I mean, other people that were forced, native people, forced from their reservations to where they were planting crops. And then they were placed in areas where it was desert. And they said they, meaning the dominant culture and the individuals, these were Congress people that were making these decisions, ladies and gentlemen. This was the government. What we now call, it would be like our government today, making these decisions. You have to understand, just like in Germany, the government was making the decisions. Hitler was in the military, part of that, military government procedure. They were making decisions to eliminate lives. This is just not, a group of people that have this. This is a government doing this. That's why we don't want to have it in textbooks. That's why we don't want to believe that these horrific things can happen, because we don't want to believe that people in leadership that we elected into office could do this. And Hitler was this great man that was revered in Germany. We don't want to believe that he would do something like that. So when we're putting us on reservations that were in desolate areas, and by the way, those stayed for a while. There were some reservations that, of course, there was uranium there. And there were other great resources, oil, that they come to find out in Oklahoma and other areas where there was uranium and other great resources that then the government wanted them back. So now they wanted to come in, and they said, well, geez, we've got these reservations out there, but they're sitting on gold mines and land mines. So now what are they going to do with us? Well, they did try to take some of that land back. Remember, in the whole time they're taking all of our land, this land, this institution is built on, is on Oklahoma land. We're doing, it just is. But we have to remember, it's built on the bones of a lot of people that gave their life. So after reservation, there was, again, forced location, because we were not supposed to survive on the reservations. And they were very surprised that we were putting seeds in the ground where there was rocks and sand and corn was coming up. And it wasn't supposed to be that way. We weren't supposed to be able to continue to eat. We were supposed to just die from homesickness from our motherland, wherever we were being forced away from. And we weren't supposed to be able to get our own food to come out of the ground, but we did. So they decided that they were going to now move us again and give us the opportunity. They couldn't make us all in the restaurant. that said they were on reservations, many. So they were now coming up with urbanization and relocation to the city. And that was, you might have heard of this man, John McCain. And he was a senator, and in 1998, he decided, 1988, excuse me, that he was going to write this bill, and he did, to relocate us, and all of it was couched in the terms of that it was going to be all better for us to be able to relocate to a different area. And so many left the reservation, went into urban areas. Now imagine you live on a reservation and you're being relocated, which is to an urban city area, and you've never been in a big city. It's very much like, I'm sure the Hmong people can relate to this, because when they came over and immigrated, we didn't do too good of a job of having them come here because they're an agricultural society, and we just continued participating in a genocide effect of placing them then, instead of dropping them and helping them relocate and immigrate into some rural areas, we put them in urban areas. And they know nothing about trying to survive in an urban area. Well, neither did we. So we weren't supposed to survive that either, and we did survive that. And that's why you have Indian people living in San Francisco, and in Oakland, and in Santa Rosa, and in Roman Park. And why you have Indian people in New York, in Los Angeles, because what they did was they moved us to these bigger areas, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, to the big city areas. And the idea was that we were to be, get jobs there, be able to work, and be able to sustain ourselves. And of course what happens, and some of us did, but it was very difficult because the spirit, walking around on concrete is very different when you're used to walking around with your feet touching the earth. And so we survived it, and it's still been very difficult, but this is why you have some Native people that are living in these big areas, and they're not on the reservation, and some of them do go back and forth, but this is all part of that, where if you cannot terminate a group of people, then you find a way, and it's called genocide, to keep them, again, at bay. And the idea is hopefully that they're not going to survive. Well, when we survived, then the next phase of genocide and the Holocaust process of trying to, again, terminate, eliminate, get rid of a group of people, and that's called assimilation. And the assimilation process was, again, to try to get us to assimilate or to become similar to the dominant culture, and to become what the dominant culture wanted us to become. And that assimilation process is at great cost to who we are as a people. You probably look at me and say, well, you look pretty assimilated. Pretty much, but not yet. Here's what happens with assimilation. If a person becomes completely assimilated, the person gives up. What's at risk is the person's language. Remember I talked about the seed and that lie? Their language, their culture, their rituals, their very dress and the way in which they dress themselves, their food that they eat, again, the way that they pray, the way in which they maintain or have their homes. So all of these things, when you assimilate, to become similar to the group that is in charge. Think like me, walk like me, talk like me, vote like me, feel like me, and the ultimate is to separate yourself from your own people and disown them and see them as the problem. That's full assimilation. I don't see myself as an assimilated Native person. The ulterior to that, or the alternative to that, excuse me, is to, which is what I feel that I do, and it's exhausting sometimes. It wears me out. But there is no other way that I can do it. And that is living in two worlds. And I have one foot in one world, and I have one foot in another world. As the old people would say, and as I was raised in the stories that were told, it's like having one foot in one canoe and one foot in another canoe. And trying to balance yourself in both of those canoes while the water underneath is changing constantly. Troubled waters underneath, lack of access to education, lack of access to housing, lack of access to medical care, told that you can't pray in your own language or speak your own language, having your children taken away from you, being accused that you are abusing your children or neglecting your children because there's 6 kids, 7 kids sleeping in the same room and you only have one cedar chest. My. So that's what I try to do. It's bouncing. I don't have the option of jumping into just one canoe. I feel like doing lots of times. And where I feel like jumping is in this canoe over here with my culture. True and complete assimilation is giving up this canoe and jumping over here in this canoe. Trying to pass. Again, remember, all these things I'm talking about is a form of assimilation, termination, genocide, Holocaust. You've got to get that it's all connected. That's what it is all about. Those of you that are, do you have anybody here that's Italian? Anybody think of a few Italians? How about anyone from Ireland? There's a lot of Irish people. How many of you in here speak the language? I would laugh here and then laugh. He's with me. So the reason I'm asking that question is for you to personalize it. Don't just hear me up here as a talking head. So I'm going to ask you in a minute to ask me some questions, and I want to hear from you. But the reason I'm asking you is not about to make you feel guilt, shame, or blame, because that's not what it's about. But you have got to understand that that's a part of genocide. That's a part of wiping out who you are by calling you an American. Well, you're an American now, speak English. One of the things that when the invasion occurred and when the annihilation of my people began, they came with a sword in one hand and a Bible in another. No disrespect to anyone who reads the Bible, and that's part of their religious belief. I'm not saying that. But that was not our belief. I did not grow up believing that I was born into sin. And I did not grow up with this. I grew up with my traditional ways and speaking my language and praying the way that I pray. And I also grew up helping my auntie, who was a spiritual woman. And every time someone would come to her to pray, and I was her helper when I was little, the first one of my jobs, one of my things that I was to do to help my auntie, the first thing that I was to do was to pull the shades down in her house. And the reason I was to pull those down is because nobody was to know what she was doing in there, because she could be arrested for practicing our own spiritual ways of healing and praying. Remember, I went home one day, I'd been to college like some of you. All I did was stuff, all I learned some things. My auntie asked me to help her. She had some people coming over. So I said, okay, auntie. She said, you know what to do. And I said, auntie, you don't have to pull these shades down anymore. Haven't you heard? Auntie, 1979. By the way, this was like a couple of years after. Auntie, in 1979, they wrote the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. We're free now, auntie. We can practice these, and you don't have to pull this down, and you don't have to be scared anymore. Because they can't do anything to you. There's a law. I was so naive. And my loving auntie, the way great she was. She just turned to me very, very quietly, very loving, and said, "And who wrote that novel, sweetheart?" And all of a sudden, it was like going through a time tunnel, you know. And I was taken all the way back 500 years later. And reminded. And just that simple phrase. And of course, then I put the shades on. Because what she was saying to me, listen, they can make all the laws they want and they have. And they've made all these promises to us, our people. And they have kept none of them. They meaning the government. And that is genocide. That is termination. That is a goal to annihilate people. And that's what Holocaust is when you break it down. It's not a pretty picture, but it is the truth. So today when I stand in two worlds, and I am an educated, whatever that's worth, in the Western world, and it does have some value, and of course what it means is I made it through the system. And I want to believe and that it can be of use and some help to my people, not to my people. What I mean by that is that for us to be able to survive horrific things like Holocaust, genocide effect, and what is also, this is the fallout of assimilation and the fallout of reservation, elimination, relocation, is what's called subjugation and termination. It's called generational trauma. I'm beginning to understand it more. In other words, for myself, because I never really realized sometimes why I would feel some of the things I felt. And why I felt that there was so much that I had to do, which is why I went to school. And I didn't start school until I was out in my 20s. That's another story, I'm a bit sidetracked with that. But it wasn't on my radar. But my grandmother knew it, and my auntie, and they knew that that was my destiny to help open the door for the next generation. Because of these two communities, these two worlds, to survive genocide, to survive termination, to survive subjugation, Holocaust effects, we have to not become by assimilating, but use those things that are to advantage, at an advantage of where we ourselves are here, and we are in control of our own destiny, as opposed to someone else. So, that is what scares the bejeebies out of the very group that is trying to eliminate us. Which is why it scares the bejeebies out of individuals that there's so many synagogues that are still on the corners. So for me, that foot in both worlds, I still speak my language, I still pray, I still have respect for my elders and do all the things that I can to care for them. And I found myself in a classroom, much like yours, and ended up, it wasn't my intention to get a Ph.D. But that kind of happened along the way as well. It was like I was going to get a BA, and I was going to go back to the reservation, and I was going to get a job in social welfare somewhere, and I was going to help my people. Well, my grandmother saw a vision for me, and so did one of my professors who mentioned to me about graduate school. I said, what the heck is graduate school? But here's how that of my experience and others is when I say that to survive this Holocaust and genocide effect is not assimilating and becoming in, but finding your place with your people and finding your place where you don't have to compromise at any cost. Although there is a cost. I mean, it was a great cost to me to sit where you sit and to go to school for 10 years. It was at a great cost because I didn't get to see my auntie. I didn't get to do some of the ceremonies, even though I would go home 3 or 4 times. But there is a cost, just like for you. Because you have to, you're doing this, and then at what cost though? What are you giving up? My time was, I was giving up time with my grandmother, and my aunt. I still don't know if it was worth it. Quite frankly, it probably was not, truth be told. And I'm sure there are some benefits from it, but I just don't know what it was because they're gone now. And gone is gone. Unless you have a spiritual belief like me, and I know that I'll see them again, but gone is gone on this planet. And that whole gone is gone is what genocide, what they want to. So, today, the next step after assimilation is exclusion. And what the culture wants to do now is exclude us. But they're finding it pretty hard to exclude us because there are people like Dr. Brenda Flyswithhawks, who is in the curriculum system in the institution. And I have pretty good credentials. Been in Sonoma State, I have a degree there. Got 2 degrees from the University of Texas, been to Harvard, been to Yale, been to Oxford, postgraduate work, and have a credential from Union Institute in San Francisco. So I can hold my own in regards to the Western. What's important though is when I go home and those credentials that I have there. Do I still know how to put my regalia on? Do I know how to tie my moccasins the right way? Is my fan taken care of? Do I speak my language? Do I pray in my own tongue? Do I know how to bring the appropriate gifts to my elders and to my spiritual leaders when I arrive there? Can I still move my feet to the drum? And when we dance? Those are the important credentials, ladies and gentlemen. Which is why I asked some of you that, are you Italian? And are you, where you come from? Do you speak the language? And not to dismiss what your goals are of trying to get your degrees and whatever your goals are that you have to do. But I'm going to suggest to you that if you don't know who you are, and you don't know where you come from, and you don't know the history of people, the true history, and how it can link to, in a blink of an eye, you being annihilated yourself and your people. Because let me tell you something. If they'll come for the Jews, if they'll come for the homosexuals, if they'll come for the activists, if they'll come for the indigenous people, they will eventually come for you. And then where do you stand? You're going to jump on board with them? Oh, I want to get. I believe whatever you tell me, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Or will you take a stand? And will you say, no way, not here, not ever again, will you, Senator John McCain, or any other senator, or any other congressperson, or any other president or president-elect, presidents-to-be, will ever do to us what you did to other people, the Jewish community, the indigenous native people. It's up to you. You're the next generation. So, I'll leave you with saying also, when I want you to ask me some questions, but in order for people to exist, we have to have our own language, we have to have our own prayers, we have to have our own attachment to the land. We take the land away, and the government promised all these treaties to us They never kept one, except one. They promised to take our land, and they did. And the very life of individuals, of a person, of a human, is in the land. I'm sure, as I look around, there are a few folks in this room that were not born in Roanoke Park. And that you come from different places, and I think there's probably some international students at this campus. And I'm telling you, if you talk to one of them, they're going to tell you they miss home. And that's why when they go back home for a visit, it's just like me. You get there, and there's something as soon as you step off the plane that just engulfs you. The air smells different. The land feels different. The air feels different. So, if you haven't been to Ireland, if you haven't been to Italy, you might want to ask yourself, why? Or Spain, or wherever your root's taken to. And if you don't know where your root's taken to, might be the day you want to find out. Because what are you going to do when they come for you? Because they probably will at some point. And if you don't know who you are, if you really don't know what your values are, and I'm talking about your cultural values, then you're going to be set up for annihilation, termination, and in a few generations, our children will read about you and how you got annihilated. What might you like to ask? Please, what have I not said that you thought I might say? Or anything?
So I was wondering, a lot of like fashion trends right now are, have to do with indigenous culture. There's also indigenous practices that are becoming really trendy. So how does that affect your people?
When am I supposed to stop? That was a lecture in itself or a discussion. Did everybody hear the question that she asked? The question she asked was, there's a lot of, it's trendy to be native now, or it's trendy to be Indian. It's trendy to get a song, have a rattle, a drum. And the question is, so how does that affect our people now? What do we think about that? How does it make us feel? Well, we don't like it. And here's the other thing, and that's the short answer. Here's the other answer. Reason is, we understand it. Listen, when there are a lot of lost souls out there, and lost spirits, like when I said, and I asked you, and I'm suggesting that if you don't know who you are and where you come from, you will grasp on to other things to try to find your soul, to try to find your spirit, and to try to find your very identity. Who am I? And you'll try to, some of those people will try to find it in a drum, a rattle, a song. I mean, I can't tell you the people that have said to me, I know that you're my mentor, I've been praying for you, you're the one. Now they mean well by that. What they mean is they want somebody to, because they're drawn to our ways. Here's what I say, and what most of us, we give you those things. Our cultural ways, the way that we pray, that's not just for us the way that we believe it's for all people. But here's where the line gets drawn, is what I have found is that that's usually what most people just want, is the drum, the rattle, and or the shield, the dream catcher. And then they want to hang it from the rearview mirror. Or their hawk, or their eagle feather, and hang it from the rearview mirror. You will not see one indigenous native person that has it hanging from the mirror. especially a dream catcher, that goes on the bed. Unless you sleep and drive at the same time. That could be very helpful to you. So, listen, no shame, no blame, no guilt, no judgment. So I cannot judge those individuals. What I can do is embrace them. But where that line goes is they don't really usually want to brace. Because of what I say to them, I say, okay, well, we're in morning sweat. So come on over Thursday night or Saturday night. We need to be here at a certain time. Come on over. Well, when does it end? Because you know, my show comes on at 10, and so I think we'll be done by then. Doubt it. Or I take them in the roundhouse. And when we go into the roundhouse is like the synagogue, or maybe your spiritual place that you go to, maybe we call it a church. And when we go in there, we're in there. And we're done when the elders, the spiritual leaders, say we're done. We're not in there for 2 hours or 4, it may be 4 hours, it may be 6. I don't think I've ever gone in that I didn't come out. At least it was 6 hours later. And ladies and gentlemen, we don't have padded chairs in there. We don't even have these kind of floors in here. When you go out there and you walk on the earth, that's what's in our roundhouse. And that's where I sit on the Mother Earth holds me. So what I find is they don't usually want that, because that requires much. So we just, pray for them. We make it available. What I find is that when push comes to shove, is that the expression? That usually they're pushing on down the road, because that's just not exactly what they want. They want the drum on their time, they want the rattle on their time, and they want to play on their time. They didn't know it required commitment, a way of life, a way of living. It concerns us that misuse will take place. Just like you heard the one, I believe it was in Arizona or New Mexico, like a year ago, or a year and a half ago, and this person, this lodge, sweat lodge, we call it the Indian, they call it the lodge, and we also call it the Misreki, and we go in, and so you've got non-native people, they mean well, and they found out, they went into it somebody and learned our ways, and then they're going to do their own ways, but they almost killed about 20 people. So that is a form of assimilation, annihilation, of taking someone else's ways and trying to take those and claim them as your own, and killing a group of people that's not non-native, but also making the folks that it belongs to look bad and trying to hold it responsible. So it's a very difficult place to be, and I would never say no to someone. But I tell them that it comes with responsibility. Something else. Was that helpful? Was that helpful? This is your chance. Be brave.
How do you compensate for indirect genocide? How can you compensate?
How can we be compensated for indirect or direct suicide, genocide? Thank you for that question. There is no compensation. Probably that's worthy. It'll never give us back what we lost. But what it can do is it can preserve the future generations. So that's what we would like to see. As long as we are referred to as American Indian, this comes up often. What do you like to be called? American Indian, Native American, Indian, you're using the word Indian, which is it? Well, it's really whatever the nation is that you hear. If you hear someone say they're Apache, that they're Lakota, or that they're Salagi, that's how you refer to yourselves. As long as we are referred to as American Indian, then we will never be referred to by our correct and proper title, which is nations of people. That's another form of genocide, in fact, as well. That, you know, we're just not up here. So having to make this, so what we would like, I mean, you know, I think we got the closest when President Clinton, who came to the Lakota Reservation. We've had President Obama that's reaching out some, but the ideal is there doesn't, this nation has really, the United States of America, still does not get what happened, does not want to acknowledge what happened to our people, which is why you don't read about us and know who we really are in your history books from K through 12 to in college. In some college classrooms, not all, but they're out there, little bits of them that are telling the truth. And it's not uncommon for those educators, by the way, those professors that tell the truth that are subject to getting fired, or they just seem to disappear after a while. That's institutionalized racism. And the other that I was talking about is called racism. So for this nation has to acknowledge that. They have to acknowledge the atrocities that have happened to our people. Now, that doesn't mean people will often ask me in that vein of that question that you asked, if the compensation comes of getting the land back. That's what we would like, of course, but that means all you have to belong. Nobody in here wants to go. But I've been here. And your generation would say, but I didn't do it. I wasn't there 500 years ago. Why are you taking it out on me? Why? And you're right. So that's not an option anymore. It's not an option. We, quite frankly, no more did we ask you to leave when the invasion started. We didn't ask them to leave. Mr. Chris came. As a matter of fact, we set him down and fixed some food. If it wasn't for our people, they would have starved to death. And they would have never been back to the Queen and said, we discovered America. So sometimes the government has talked to us and tried to pay us for money, just like they did with the Lakota, tried to pay us for the land. Okay. And of course, we've refused that money because it's like an insult, you know, to try to say that you can wash away those. And as maybe even some of my spiritual friends that participate maybe New Year, how do you wash away the sins of them? It's like dirty money. It's like dirty money. So I think that if we could be not just my people, but all people, Jewish people, especially those that have experienced these atrocities, we now put under this umbrella of what we call a Holocaust, is to really embrace our people, those peoples, and ask us to be side by side, to start referring to our people as nations of people, to where we have representation on the Senate and on the Congress and all that, but some type of addressing us and interacting with us in an equitable, fashionable way, to where we don't have poverty on our reservation lands, that we don't have, you know, I don't know if you know this, how many of you know that in the 1970s and in the 1980s, that there were medical doctors coming on our reservations and clinics that were set up there, and our women and young women were coming in to get whatever they could go in and be having a headache, and they wanted an aspirin or whatever, and they were having their inside organs cut. They were sterilized. They came in with a headache and they left sterilized. Now that happened right here in the United States. That's why I'm saying, if they're going to come for me, I'm telling you, it's just a matter of time that they come for you. And if it is on their agenda to wipe you out, and especially if it stays on that, and just like this passed down to me all the way from 500 years ago, and before that, you know, my ancestors go all the way back to the stars that we call the Pleiades, the seven sisters. That's where I came from. And I know where I came from. I know how I got here. I know the star story. I know all that. I know when I go back, the journey that I'll make by the Milky Way. That's what keeps me here, healthy, and praying. So I don't know what they can do completely except to let us honor who we are, let us practice our ways. I think that's beginning. And I would love to hear a public apology. I'm sorry. Or somebody like the President of the United States who said, I'm sorry our government did what they did to your people. Might be a good beginning. I haven't heard it yet.
In many instances of genocide, I feel like you hear a lot about one's spirituality or faith being shattered. How would you say for your people, how have you been able to maintain and foster your own spirituality across generations?
I think it's because of the grandmothers. I believe that they themselves not only nurtured us, and not only did our mothers feed us on the breast to keep us physically alive, but our grandmothers fed us on the breast of spirituality. And whether we knew it or not, and whether we wanted it or not, we were going to get that teaching. And there are a lot. I feel very blessed. I'm one of 6 children. I was raised in a 4-generation home. And my grandmother was the head of the house. And I loved how she respected the men that were in my brothers, her sons, the uncles, all played a part. But I loved how she was with the men and how the men were toward my grandmother. But I believe that it is that type of love, that type of spiritual affection that sustains us today. And I think that it's been able for me, bless you, to speak my language, to pray in my own language. There's just nothing like it. I understand. I've been to synagogue before, and I understand. I love God. And I've been blessed enough. I'll never forget the first time it happened to me, and it's happened to me many times before, being there for different occasions and ceremonies they do and different things. And they open up, or they keep what they call the Torah. And they bring it out very, very spiritually and with much purpose. And you know, they know what they're carrying. The lives of the ones that came before them. When they walked by me, sitting just like this, I reached for my own prayer handkerchief. Because I saw people touch me. They were just the books that they were holding. They were touching. And I said to my friend next to me, what does that mean? And he told me that it was, there's nothing, you can't be closer to who you are. And than for that Torah to pass you by. It's all your relatives. And that spiritual significance of it. And I said, do you think I can touch it? He says, we want you to. Much back to your question of asking, that's what we want you to do in that house. And I remember touching that Torah with my handkerchief that I keep. And I just felt something, and I every time when I go, if I'm there, I'll make sure that I reach out and touch this Torah. So I feel that it's that teaching, of knowing that. And those of you in here that may be very foreign to you, even that I will get moved by that. But it's that, we have to be moved to that place if we're ever going to keep things like the Holocaust from happening again. We have to find a way that we do things that others say that they tell us that we can't do. Listen, my mother and father, both of my parents, by the way, I'm very blessed, they're both from my reservation. My mother is Native, my father is Native, and they found each other. There's 9 different communities at my reservation. It used to be 45,000 square miles, and now it's 43, what do you call it? Not square miles. It used to be square miles, and now it's not acres, but it's 126,000 acres, and there's 9 communities. And in those 9 communities are different folks that live, and my mother and father found each other. And the fact that they found each other, and the fact that I was raised with that, it just amazes me. But I think that we have to know who we are. We have to just be able to, whatever comes up against us. Because I wonder sometimes, I'm telling you, when I was a student, I sat where you sat, and I heard some of the things that, they didn't have this kind of equipment when I sat where you sat, but the things that come on board and some of the things that were said. I just, where did they get that idea? About my people, or about other people. So I had to pray myself through the education process. And knowing that there was a whole purpose of why I was there, and it was about survival for my people. So I'm not sure if I'm even answering your question, but I think that what we have to do is just, I know that what sustains us now is when we are, like I go to sweat at least once a week, and sometimes 2 times a week. There are, you may or may not know it, but there are roundhouses that are in this area in Sonoma County and Mendocino County. There are sweat lodges that are out on Sebastopol River, for example. There are sweat lodges that are in Santa Rosa, in the backyards. And I have to go in there because I have to revisit and go back to the belly of Mother Earth. Because if I didn't, I couldn't do this kind of strategy. And when I go into the classroom, like with my students, with you, in large halls like this, and I just couldn't do it. And I've learned how to do that in the Western world. One of the things my students don't see is that I'm in my office before I go in with my bundle of sage. Because how in the world can I jump in this and go in and think and do things without doing this first? I have to clean myself and I pray before I go into the classroom. And that's who I am. I don't try to hide it. I don't lie about it. I'm not ashamed of it. That's who I am. And I remember when I first got hired at Santa Rosa Junior College as a professor there. And I would be doing it, and I found out later. I kind of sensed them outside, but many of my colleagues and some others are going, she's doing it. I can smell it. And of course, now they know. Oh, she's praying. And praying for them, and praying for that institution. It's institutional. Can I light this in here? Institutionalized racism. So the reason I asked her if I could light this is, was there another question? Somebody can. This is white sage, comes from, originates from in the desert here. And this one I grow in my backyard on Lodi Street, right up here in Santa Rosa. Actually, I've got to this weekend harvest some more because it's pretty nice. So this is the way that we pray, one of the ways that we pray. And this is the way that we clean ourselves off. You may not know it, but out there in the world and around us, we believe in spirits, and we believe that there are spirits that are good spirits, and there are spirits that are not so good. And the ones that are not so good will jump on them and then we'll mess with their mind. I'm a licensed psychologist, and it was very interesting to me going through that training of all these things that they would talk about schizophrenia and bipolarism. I was just talking about that this morning with my students because I was teaching a psychology class. This won't hurt you, by the way. No, that deep could get blessed. It's nice to see you. So this, so when we talk about in my world, and talk about, or not my world, in this, my curriculum world of psychology, and some of you might have been in, somebody's coughing already, away over on the other side. Is that there are disorders and mental diseases and things that can happen to us. Well, in my world, the way I braid it together for my students, because I can't help but braid it together, you know. And they're usually sitting there just like this, listening. You know. They're very interested, just like I'm sure that you are in your classes, at least I hope you are. This is, it won't hurt you. I know that it does, maybe for some of you, it does smell very different. But this is what, again, sustains me and helps me to be a better person. My grandmother would call it being a better two-legged. And she would say at times that we're all pitiful two-leggeds. And we are just trying to figure out how to be better two-leggeds. As I say to my students when we're talking, I'm saying that we are, of course, in the Western world, they would like for us to believe that we're all, normal on our way to something, possibly to abnormality, and that we are all sane with the potential of becoming insane. And what I would suggest to you, that we are all insane, because how in the world could things like Holocaust occur if the person is sane? So we are all insane on our way, working very hard every day to become sane. So I don't know what time we're supposed to stop, but if there's another question, I'll take it. Otherwise, yes.
How would you suggest people find out more factual information if they want to?
The question is, how do we go about, how would I suggest we find out more factual information about about Native people? Well, there are some pretty good books that are written by Native people out there. Those are the ones that I would look at first. Leslie Warren Silko, it's a novel that she wrote some time ago called Ceremony, and embedded in that novel, and it's not a quick read. It's about that big. But I don't know how many times that students have said, and people that I tell them, I just couldn't, I pick it up and I try to read it, I don't understand it. But if you can hang with it, it gives you real insight to what we've been talking about here today, and the genocide effect of annihilation and how it affects our people and how it affects the people that, the characters that she uses in there are real characters. So what I would suggest is that when you are reading information, that again what you're doing is that you're looking at who wrote it. And there are some people out there, by the way, that present themselves as Native and they're not. And so sometimes you just read that stuff that whether you don't know if they're Native or not, and you read it and you like it, and I think gave something to you, that's fine. Of course, the internet is just, got everything on it now. You know that. You guys just love it, right? I've seen a lot of you just doing that while I was here, and you're looking for, and you just can't help it when you move into it. And that's a resource. You just have to wade your way through it. But my best suggestion would be, you're doing it today. You came. And you honor me and you honor my family, especially my grandmother, by showing up. That's the toughest part, is showing up. You could have been somewhere else. I'm sure you've got other places to be at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, especially when the person is supposed to be here and doesn't show up. You're like, well, I got here all the time. And look at you, you stayed. And I thank you for that. But that's the number one, that's the best thing you can do, is that when you have the opportunity to be in the presence of whatever the culture is, and you have somebody that is from that group to speak, show up, because you're going to get the truth from that person's, most of the time, you're going to get accuracy from that. So that's what I would suggest.